I'm John Ochins, and welcome to My Life. There's been a lot of talk around these parts lately about global mindedness in our schools and elsewhere. Looks like we'll even have an International Residence Academy for 200 Chinese students here in Oxford. Our guest today is a pioneer in this. His first trip to China was 26 years ago with a program at Oakland University. He's been there every year since. In addition to being a world traveler and a photographer, he's a retired teacher and coach from Pontiac Central High School. He's also been a volunteer community coach for many years, coaching his own and my kids on and off. He's a local pioneer in community television, having done sports at the Waterford station back in the 1980s when this sort of thing was just getting off the ground. He has also been my friend for nearly 40 years. I'm pleased to have Bill Richardson on this program. Welcome, Bill.
Thanks, John.
And I got to say, one of your loves is sports, obviously, the Lions in particular, and you've got to love them a little bit more this year. I mean, after all, they are getting involved in the playoffs, and I mean, you did follow them to London a couple of times, and they've done better than previously. So you got to be smiling a little bit. And then there's a Harbaugh thing at U of M. We got a new, supposedly better coach there. So you got to be smiling about a couple things anyway from the sports angle.
Definitely, John, very definitely.
I want to start, I think, by talking to you a little bit about the China thing with your vast experience and the fact that you've virtually traveled the world. There's a lot of talk about global mindedness these days, and as you can see, Oxford is doing a lot to bring this concept to reality with our kids, with the 200 Chinese kids that supposedly will be coming to town by way of the Wyoming organization. I wanted to just touch bases with you on that subject to get things started and get some thoughts from you.
Yeah, John, there's no question, and because I made that first trip to China in 1988, and here we are in 2014, almost 15, what I've seen going on in China is just staggering. It's a time warp. And the whole impetus right now in China with families is to how do I get my child involved in a program that would allow them to study internationally. The number one target internationally certainly is the United States of America. If that doesn't come to pass, then it becomes Britain, it becomes Canada, Australia. Those are other major areas that the Chinese are looking at. But there's no question that from their standpoint, they want very, very much for their children to study here. Chinese education, John, and to the audience, is relatively backward. There's a notion out there that in America, for example, boy, I wish our students would be as good as the Chinese students. Well, there's a lot more to it, John, than that. Our students are head and shoulders above the Chinese from an educational standpoint. They are much more in tune with the world. The whole focus in China is to prepare students well for the examination, which will allow them to move from primary school to the best junior high, from the best junior high to the best senior high, and hence into university from there. So the focus really is on testing. Take the test, get a high mark that allows you to move through the system. As you well know, I think we are kind of going in a similar direction here, which concerns me a great deal. Mm-hmm. But that's not what we're talking about right now. And what I would share with you is there's no doubt that the Chinese are looking globally to continue to expand and to get their children into schools that are going to allow them to develop imaginations, a sense of creativity. Even the government in Beijing has been very critical of public education across the board, saying what we have been doing for a long time isn't working. We need to be more competitive on a world basis. And this is part of why, as I shared a little earlier, so many Chinese parents now who have the money because of New China want their children out of the country into better schools where, again, this whole sense can be developed.
And it costs them a lot of money, too.
Oh, John, it costs them a ton of money, and depending on the schools, but it's certainly, there's no question that yeah, it's a lot of money for the Chinese parent to send that child to school here in America.
And I've talked to some of these kids, and what really surprises me is when you bring up the subject of how do you feel about leaving home for months on end, being halfway around the world, it doesn't bother them. They really look forward to their opportunities here. And then when you talk to them about what are they going to do after high school, it's rarely going back home, but pursuing a college education either here or Europe or someplace else.
John, in reference to what you're saying, and this is something, and I understand this very, very well, the pressure on children in academic settings in China is far beyond anything you could begin to imagine. The child is brought up from day one with an emphasis on the family, with an emphasis on the importance and the role of education. And don't ever embarrass mom or dad or anybody in that family. It's about family, it's about the family unit, and it's critical that children perform as well as they can perform and make the family proud. And hence, it's easy for me to understand why young people who are coming here are relatively happy about what's going on. They don't have that grueling pressure at home, John, and also at school, where things basically are pounded into them. And so they come here, and there's much more freedom. They don't have mom or dad sitting there at night kind of pushing them and trying to find out what happened today and you need to do it. So it's a whole different life for them here. And there's no question. And again, they want to make their parents proud while they're here, because those parents have put a lot of money forward for them to study in these schools.
The other side of the coin is what we're doing with our own educational system. And you've been an educator all your life. Did you ever imagine that our kids would start studying Chinese in the 3rd grade?
John, that's certainly not until I became involved in China. And I was very sensitive to the importance of foreign language for students. I've always felt that this really was something that all students should be involved in, at least exposed to, not necessarily becoming fluent in anything and taking it for many, many years. But no, the Chinese part of it years ago, I would not have realized. But when I made that first trip into China in 1988 and came back, my thought was, we need to begin looking at this at the high school in Pawnee. We need to begin thinking about how can we offer Chinese language. And so, it became something I became very, very sensitive to once I had that exposure.
We're going to take a little break right now, but we'll be right back with Bill Richardson.
Hi everybody, I'm Terry Stiles.
Hi everybody, I'm Bill Service, and I'm the producer of Our Community Access. Terry and I started our show 8 years ago to bring our community into your living rooms.
Our Community Access is a show born from the rich diversity of our community, and we want to brag about it and the people creating that diversity.
Over the year, we've been from fox hunts to beekeeping and right in your own backyard.
We welcome new businesses, chamber fashion, senior hobbies, class reunions, and much, much more.
We've covered all our celebrations from Leonard Strawberry Festival to our premier Lone Ranger Parade.
But there's still more avenues that we plan on going on.
So watch Our Community Access at 9:30 and 5:30 every day, and you have a great, great week.
Hi, this is Connie again from Connie's Kitchen, coming to you from Treetop Lodge, the place where magic happens and unicorns roam freely. Of course, you have to come to the lodge to understand about the unicorn thing, but they're everywhere. We'll be doing a wide variety of cooking shows here on Oxford Community Television, and I personally would like to thank the crew for coming out and giving me this opportunity to share my passion and what I love to do with you from Connie's Kitchen. So please join us on OCTV, join us at the lodge, and look for us all over the town. And if you see unicorns, they probably came from here. See you soon.
We're back with my friend Bill Richardson on My Life. And Bill, we were just talking about, the influence of the Chinese students in our educational system, the kids who are coming to stay here, and the programs and how they're going. And I believe you wanted to pick up on that.
Yeah, John, and I want to say something here too. In term, you know, whenever we look at this idea that there are Chinese students here, there become questions about what are they doing here and how are they funded and all the rest of this stuff. But I would contend also that it's very, very good for American students to become in contact with real Chinese students, students who are coming from mainland. I think a lot can be learned and a lot can be gained with the interactions between real Chinese students, as I would call them, and our students here in America. I am, as I was telling you in a few minutes ago, I'm familiar with the program in Oxford. I have some friends who live in Oxford who often will host the Chinese teachers from Beijing who are here teaching in Oxford schools. So I've met the Chinese teachers also who are working in Oxford schools, and I'm so impressed with them and with what they're doing. And I think the students are very lucky to have these young people who are here to teach Chinese. I would also like to share that you mentioned numbers earlier in terms of the projection for eventually what's going to happen here in Oxford. Again, a program which I like what I see. I was sharing with you off camera that there also is a very big program in St. Clair Shores that's going on right now. I'm going to make a comment here too. Romeo Schools is going to be involved in this in the very near future. And plans are being made right now for some students to begin to come to Romeo Schools from China. But these students will come from the southwest part of the country. And also Wall Lake is going to be involved in this in the very near future. It may be in the next few months. It may be off next year. But again, it's going to start slowly with a minimal number of students, and it's going to develop.
You know, it seems that, and we could spend a whole show just talking about this. It's such a fascinating subject. But people I've talked to around here in Oxford have said that, you know, part of the greatness of the program is that you have these students come and live in the homes of our residents, and there's a sharing of culture that takes place there. And what seems to be happening is it's getting harder to find families willing to volunteer to do this sort of thing, and that is what is enhancing this international academy that they're talking about, where they're hoping to build on Oxford property and you know, bring in 200 students. So I don't know how that's going to go with these other communities that you mentioned, but that's what I'm told we're seeing around here.
You know, John, it's so important for the Chinese students who are here to be living with American families and to experience American culture, American foods, American thinking, all the things that go with that. This is so critically valuable. But what's going to happen over a span of time, if indeed Oxford is looking at some 220 students, you're not going to find that many host families. Yeah. So you're looking at a situation where perhaps an academy does need to develop, right. And there are dormitories for these students. And the issue that would concern me there for the students, the Chinese students, would be the fact that they're going to lose this sense of family, this sense of being involved with real American culture. But when you get into larger numbers like that, that certainly is something that's going to have to be addressed.
It'll be interesting to see how things go.
Yeah, very. But John, let me say also that, you know, it's not just St. Clair Shores, Oxford, Romeo in the beginning stages, Wall Lake in the beginning. You're going to see more and more of this. I'm sure. You're going to see more and more of this for all kinds of reasons. And again, I think it's advantageous to American students to have this opportunity to interact with real Chinese students and to learn much more about their real culture, and not Chinese students who, for example, are native-born Americans, who I don't even really consider to be Chinese students.
I want to talk about Bill Richardson in China. Okay, you've been going there. It's been 26 years now that you've been going to China. Tell us, how did that all get started? And was it a tough decision for you to make?
I was teaching at Pontiac Central High School, John, and I started there in 1962 and I retired in 95. But in 1987, I was at Pontiac Central and I was working in some tandem programming with Oakland University. And I was involved with the Dean of the School of Education and some people from the reading department. And anyway, they came to me out of the blue and nowhere and said to me, we are starting to develop a relationship with Guizhou Province, China. And we want to begin to send some teachers there to teach English. We don't have any money. Of course, I didn't either. But the bottom line was, they said, we really are interested in you.
And remember, the Iron Curtain was still up back then.
Yeah.
This was a different era.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, John. So anyway, I was approached and they said, look, we're going to send 2 full PhDs from Oakland who I had met once or twice and 1 other public school teacher. We think it's a good combination, but we really want you to go. I was, I felt honored. I thought, my goodness, I'd never been out of the country, John. So anyway, I hedged on it and I wouldn't answer. They kept calling and I kept saying, well, I don't know. So finally they just said, look, you got to make a decision. So something said to me, go. And it was a non-funded program, John. So it was a matter of my taking care of the airfares and anything to get there. Once we were there, we'd be taken care of. And so I finally said, okay. And so off I went in 1988, and I had the most incredible experience of my life, working primarily with Chinese English teachers who were on summer holiday. There were a few people that would wander in and out just to listen, but most of them were teachers. And what I tried to work hard on was improving their listening, their speaking, their reading. They wrote pretty well. And so, I got to know these people. I was in their homes. We were exchanging culture. We were traveling on weekends in China's poorest and most backward province. Absolutely stunningly beautiful areas. And I was just really overwhelmed by all of it. Came back after about 6-7 weeks. We did a little traveling, John.
Was this during the
afterward.
summer?
During the summertime.
Okay.
Did a little traveling. We were in Chengdu, where you'll find the Panda Reserve, and stopped to look at that Wulong. And then we flew up to Beijing and spent some time on the Great Wall, and then flew over to Xi'an and looked at the terracotta soldiers. So, we did some traveling along with it because I didn't know whether or not I'd ever get back there. Well, in 1989, I was not slated to go, and I had decided I needed to recover from whatever happened to me in '88.
Right,
but anyway,
we need to take a little break right there, but let's pick up on that when we come back.
Hi everyone, don't forget you can purchase DVDs of your favorite shows from OCTV, whether it's Minutes by Minute, our Community Access, or Connie's Kitchen. Just call the station. Our number is 248-628-9658. And enjoy watching all of our shows on OCTV.
Okay, back with Bill Richardson. Bill, you were talking about 1988.
John, yeah, I went in '88 and for about the 6 to 7 week span and did the traveling. But in 1988, 89, I had not applied to go. I needed to kind of recover from what had happened to me, whatever it was, and I knew something had changed me with that international experience. And anyway, I did not, in '89, along came Tiananmen Square. And, the tanks in Tiananmen and all the problems. The universities were all closed. So we did not have a program in 1989. The program went back into existence in '90. I did not go, but knew that I had to go back. I left something there.
What kind of feelings did you have when you first went over there? Were you welcomed with open arms by these people? Because remember, this was a heavily communist, really communist country back then. This was before the Iron Curtain fell. It was different then than what it is now. Tell me more about that.
John, I was well trained at Oakland University by a gentleman who'd been with the CIA by the name of John Marney, who is now deceased. But John sat us down and talked a lot about what was really going on in China, what we needed to be careful of. In other words, don't go in there and talk about politics. Don't go in there and talk about religion. And he said, there's a possibility you're going to be followed. Your classroom's going to be monitored. And John said, just use some sense. Well, I had pretty good common sense anyway. So as a result, off I went. Well, we were welcomed with open arms, John. It was just overwhelming, the warmth that we received when we started in the classrooms on weekends wherever we went. Although, because of the province I was in, there were a lot of places that had never seen a foreigner. And I literally ran when we got out of the car. They'd never seen anybody look like us. And then there was the issue of hotels. Foreigners were not welcome in all hotels back then, John. And that's part of the old regime. But what I would share with you is that despite what I just said to you, we were welcomed openly. The four of us were well trained to do what we were there to do, and that was to work with the people, develop relationships, maybe establish the beginning of a bridge between Oakland University and Guizhou.
And once again, your job was to
work with the teachers that we had and help them with their listening, speaking, and reading. We did some writing too, John, certainly as one of the four core parts of it.
So you were teaching English to Chinese teachers? To
Chinese English teachers. Mm-hmm. And we were very, very well received. And they did anything you could ask them to do. Ages, they would range anywhere from, 22, 23, on into their 40s. We had a man that was in his 50s who memorized Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech.
Really?
Because he loved Martin Luther King. And he got up and did it, in a way that I'll never forget. Brought tears to my eyes. And it was one of those things that you're just stunned by. And it was loud, it was clear, it was emotional. Something I'll never forget.
After Tiananmen Square,
yeah,
what changed?
John, I didn't go the year following, but I did return after that. I would share that I didn't see a whole lot of change. More building was starting to go on because of some of the new economic policies which had been established in China at that time. This is kind of complicated, but Deng Xiaoping, who, quite frankly, was the one who ordered the soldiers to open fire in Tiananmen Square, pretty well considered to be the one that really did this. But Deng Xiaoping also set up a new city, an economic zone across from Hong Kong called Shenzhen. And it was an attempt to open China economically, to change the whole economic structure of China. And hence, when I went back in '91, things were already changing, John. And I saw a lot of building start, a lot of development. Well, I could track that from, 91 all the way to, I was there last summer for 8 weeks. And the development of the apartment buildings, because there aren't a lot of private homes in China, John. There might be some in Beijing, Shanghai, but for the most part, it's high-rise apartment buildings. But it's just staggering, the amount of building and the development of the infrastructure. It is just, there's no way to describe it. And when people that work in China with me, they come and they look around and they say, I can't believe it. Look at all the building, look at all the development that's taken place. But that's where China is today.
What about the attitude of the people? What kind of a difference did you see with them after Tiananmen Square?
John, initially I would say, for example, in 91, 92, 93, I was there all 3 of those times, I didn't see a whole lot of difference. In other words, it wasn't something that I just saw, wow, look at the difference in people now. I didn't see that, but I would say starting in the latter part of the 1990s into the 2000s, everything just changed. I mean, people are open. It was kind of like people are looking for new opportunities. It's no longer go to work every day and do the things that they had done for who knows how long. People were looking for new opportunities. People were looking for new businesses. There was a real emphasis on individuals and developing their own businesses. And that's a lot of what's happened in there. It's still complicated because government is always going to be involved in that. Government's complicated here, John. So, but what I'm saying is that I saw major changes in the people develop in the latter part of the 90s into the 2000s. It just opened up. And people now, for example, they talk about religion, they talk about politics. I don't do that in a classroom, but they're more than willing to talk about. Sometimes they'll ask me at lunch or at dinner if we're having a meal together. The classic question is, are you a Christian? And I respond by saying yes. I don't say a whole lot more. And sometimes it stops right there. And some of them will say, well, I go to a church. And John, for the audience part too, that may shake a few people here, but if churches are legal in China if they're registered with the government, there are churches in China. And there's this notion that they can't have them. Yes, they can, but they must be registered with the government, which means that the government's watching to make sure that there's not a whole, organization starting up. And but people can go to church in China. That is a reality. I have friends who go to church in Beijing, in Shanghai, wherever.
It seems like the political change is a very gradual one in China, unlike the falling of the Iron Curtain and that sort of thing. We're going to take a little break now, but we're going to come back and talk more about that. In fact, what we're going to do is we're going to do another episode of My Life with Bill Richardson. He's got a great story to tell. So please join us for that, and we'll visit with you next time. You're watching OCTV, Oxford Community Television, serving Oxford, Addison Township, and the village of Leonard.